Hello, listeners of Heart and Soul Gospel Ministry. This is Joseph, the host of Wake Up Call. Here's John chapter 18, verses 38 through 40. Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him, but you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So, do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" They cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was a robber. Barabbas is a figure who is introduced in all four Gospels. He's known to us as the person who was released instead of Jesus. Matthew chapter 27, verse 16 says Barabbas was a well-known prisoner. Matthew chapter 15, verse 7 describes him in more detail. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who committed murder in the uprising. Also, Luke chapter 23, verse 19 gives a similar description as Matthew. Barabbas has been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. To summarize, Barabbas plotted insurrection and committed murder in the uprising. He was a well-known person who also committed robbery. There are some scholars who speculate that Barabbas was a member of the Zealots who went against the Roman military force. It seems that the assumption was made because of the expression that he had led an uprising. It's because the term insurrection means people causing uprising due to dissatisfaction with the political power. Some scholars even say that Barabbas was a righteous outlaw who would rob from the wealthy and the Romans and share the spoils with the people. However, if we recognize our thoughts based on the Bible, it seems difficult to view Barabbas as a zealot or a righteous outlaw. First, the Greek translation of the word insurrection is stasis, and it means conflict, riot, commotion, and fight. It is used about 9 times in the New Testament, and only when referring to Barabbas, it is translated as uprising 3 times. The other 6 instances are translated as dispute, conflict, uproar, and even standing. Therefore, although it is clear that Barabbas caused a riot and conflict, it's hard to say that he was an insurrectionist. Furthermore, the Gospel of John, which was written last among the 4 Gospels, distinctly describes Barabbas as a robber, unlike the other Gospels. So it would be more correct to say that Barabbas was more of a murderer and robber who caused the commotion in Jerusalem than a leader of an insurrection. Barabbas was considered an undesirable person by the people living in Jerusalem. It's because he caused them harm. This is precisely why Governor Pilate asked the people during the Passover festival if they wanted him to pardon Jesus or Barabbas. Why did Pilate ask this question? Pilate couldn't find any fault in Jesus, whom the Jews captured to be killed. From Pilate's perspective, he hoped that by presenting the choice of either releasing Jesus, who had committed no crime, or Barabbas, a hated murderer and robber, the people would choose to release Jesus instead. It was Pilate's intention to release Jesus instead of the detestable Barabbas and dismiss the Jews' request to kill Jesus. No matter how much Jesus may not have appealed to them, he would still be better than Barabbas, the murderer and robber. For this reason, Barabbas cannot be considered the leader of an insurrection or a righteous outlaw. If he were truly the leader of a rebellion, like a freedom fighter, the Jewish people would have respected him. Pilate's choice would not have made sense if Barabbas was seen that way. Because Pilate's intention was to set Jesus free by comparison. It would be natural for people to think, if that infamous murderer Barabbas is released again, who knows what kind of trouble he'll stir up in the town. Our family might end up suffering because of him. Even if I'm not too fond of Jesus, at least he doesn't cause harm. It's better for him to be released than Barabbas. This kind of reasoning is far more natural and fitting to the context. However, the Jewish crowd made a choice completely contrary to Pilate's expectations. They asked him to release the murderer, robber Barabbas, and kill Jesus. Here is Luke chapter 23, verse 18. But the whole crowd shouted, "Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us." The name Barabbas comes from the Aramaic bar, meaning son, and Abba, meaning father, so his name literally means son of the father. Barabbas symbolizes all the people born as descendants of Adam, who was first human. He had accomplices who committed robbery with him. Originally, he was supposed to be crucified with them on the Passover day. However, because of the sudden arrest of this man called Jesus, Barabbas was released. He was supposed to die with the other two robbers, but instead he was set free, and on the cross that was meant for him. Jesus was crucified in his place, alongside Barabbas's two accomplices. What kind of life do you hope Barabbas lived after being released that day? Or what kind of life would have been proper for him to live? Of course, neither the Bible nor church history records what happened to Barabbas after that day. But what if we were to hear that Barabbas, after being released in place of Jesus and gaining his freedom, continued to live as he did before, committing robbery and murder? How would that make you feel? What would we say to him? "Barabbas, how can you do that? Don't you have a conscience? You were about to die, but Jesus died instead and you have been released. If so, shouldn't you thank Jesus who died on the cross instead of you? Shouldn't you get rid of your past sin and live for the one who gave you life?" Wouldn't we say something like that to him? I know I would. And honestly, those are the very words I want to say to myself as well. Beloved Heart and Soul Gospel Ministry listeners, are you living the way you believe Barabbas should have lived after that day? Are you living the very life you would expect from him? Do you realize that Jesus took your place on that cross, the very cross that you were meant to bear, and that you have been set free? Here is Ephesians chapter 5, verses 14 through 17. This is why it is said, "Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Be very careful, then, how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is." We must be awakened from our slumber of faith and carefully consider how we live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of the time given to us, understanding the Lord's will and living according to it. The days are evil. The world will continually try to weaken our faith and push us to compromise. Let us not fall into temptations of this world, but instead live for Jesus, the one who died and rose again for us. I hope to meet you again at this time next week. Goodbye.